Hello everybody, my name is Wael Azafari and I am going to be discussing the movie Juno that's made in 2007, and I'm also going to be discussing the psychological perspectives that connect to it and the theories that also align with it. To start off, the story of Juno begins in a friendly suburban neighborhood that is located in Minnesota. Juno McGuff, a 16-year-old attending high school, was like no other teenager living with her father and her stepmother, coming with their own package of uniqueness. Juno McGuff had a limitation to her interests, such as spending the day hanging around her room, either on the phone with her best friend Leah, playing instrumental guitar, or talking to her boy best friend Bleeker, who she had an intimate relationship with, which led to her pregnancy. Although Juno was very sarcastic, outgoing, and had her own set of beliefs, the baby she carries begins to put a heavy weight on her. Juno, who's aware that she's very young, contemplates keeping her baby and decides to get an abortion. The pressure of being a mom was a lot to Juno, especially since her biological mother was around growing up, making the thought of being a mom sound way scarier in her head. Finding out that you're becoming a parent in your teenage years can come with a lot of pressure and many fears, such as telling your parents about it or even confessing to your partner. Juno understands that telling Bleeker is a necessary factor since he's the one that she slept with, but the parents worried her a little bit more. After building enough courage, Juno decides to finally open up to her parents and brings up the idea of putting the baby up for adoption to a couple that she already had in mind. Juno's best friend had found out this couple named Mark and Vanessa, who seemed to be a fit to be parents, are already living a peaceful life in a great neighborhood. Juno and her father then decide to take a drive to the couple to get to know them. That's when they come to the conclusion that Mark and Vanessa are a great fit for Juno's unborn baby. Now, although Juno officially decides to give her baby to this couple, her thoughts eventually shift, especially about Mark, since he starts revealing dark secrets to Juno as they bond, revealing that the truth about his marriage falling apart. Mark then explains to Juno how he doesn't feel happy with Vanessa anymore and wants to continue pursuing his music instead. Having a kid that at that moment isn't actually what he really wants. This makes Juno start re-questioning giving the baby up to the couple, since she feels a bit heartbroken and confused on why Mark doesn't feel ready to be a parent, or let alone love his wife anymore. This changed a big point of view in Juno's head and making her realize that giving the baby to another couple might be a better choice. After getting advice from her father about what it really means to be in love, it gave her enough courage to confront Bleeker, to confess her true love for him, and to give up the baby to another couple. Juno and Bleeker end up communicating. They admit their true feelings for one another, and the baby gets adopted by another couple, and they continue to pursue what's best for both of them. So after watching and learning about the story, you pick up some observations of some of the characters, including Juno herself. The main character, Juno, can be looked at through a psychodynamic perspective. At first, Juno was being careless, didn't really take the time to process any of her feelings, sleeping with Bleeker, getting pregnant, and carelessly choosing to have an abortion. But Juno was also very hard-headed. For instance, trying to give Juno advice or speak to her about certain subjects would usually end with confusion, since Juno tends to be very unpredictable. As the story progresses, Juno picks up valuable life knowledge from her friends, family, and couples, which changes her behavior. For example, when Juno was at the clinic for her abortion, her friend that was protesting outside had tried to convince her that having abortions is wrong and the babies are blessings from God. Even though Juno ignored her at first, the overwhelmness got to her in the clinic as she saw others stressing about getting rid of their baby, which then made her change her mind and decide that babies actually have more value than just to get an abortion. Another example is after Juno's special moment with Mark, where they're dancing slowly together in the basement and Juno starts hugging him and laying her head on him. This shows out an example of how Juno wasn't really thinking in that situation, being in the basement with a grown man and having sort of an intimate moment with him, which could have been led by her thoughts of an unconscious mind. Juno in the beginning of the story was more about herself and her interests, but towards the end of the story, she gains the skill of understanding and being communicative with her closest ones. Sigmund Freud, sorry if I'm saying the name wrong, an American psychologist who proposes many theories such as a personality development through one's choices and thoughts in their environment, and can drastically affect their character through life experiences. The theory also explains how sometimes a person's unconscious mind can be caused through uncontrolled conflicts and it changes throughout life experiences. The reason why I believe this theory connects best with my perspective is because Juno was careless in the beginning of the story, having sex with Bleecker, knowing the risks of pregnancy happening, which happens anyways through the story. She wasn't in a relationship with Bleecker at the time, but she was still having a baby, and she felt like having abortion was the best choice. Even though Juno tends to make decisions before putting any thought to it, she was still able to change throughout her pregnancy journey. Juno speaking with her father and the couple, taking intel and advice from them, helped show growth in Juno and change in her character. At first, Juno was being careless about the baby and used to be unnecessarily mean to Bleecker, only going with decisions that met her satisfaction. After conversing with her dad and the couple, she was able to gain more wisdom and be more logical with her choices and those who are close to her. Juno becomes more sensible, trying to be more understanding of others and their perspective. She then begins to look for what's best for her baby, and then steps up to Bleecker, owning up to her wrongs and confessing how she truly feels to him, which had been a mutual feeling for a long time. It just neither of them have spoken up. This is able to show a representation of Freud's theory because it discusses acts committed of the unconscious mind, which is important to realize and understand because Juno had sex with Bleecker. She admitted she wasn't really thinking it through to her friend, and that she was bored, not knowing what she was thinking, hence the unconscious mindset that Freud speaks about. So Juno McGov's psychological perspective can relate to others, but the character Mark Loring can be viewed in a psychological humanistic perspective and in connection with Carl Rogers' theory. The character Mark Loring is married to Vanessa Loring in the story of Juno, who were originally supposed to adopt Juno's unborn baby. In the story, Mark comes off as this friendly, talkative man who has interest in band music and in fact wants to be a band singer himself. Mark is very well spoken and has an aura around him that gives those in his circle a feeling of comfortability. The relationship Mark creates with Juno becomes important in the story because it gives Mark the ability to speak up about certain things that has been on his mind. Mark and Juno's similar interest in band music and old style music helped them strengthen their relationship, showing change in Mark. Juno giving Mark attention, making him feel seen and heard, allows Mark to start speaking truthfully about what's on his mind. Mark confirms he isn't in love with Vanessa anymore and that he doesn't want to raise a child yet. He's not ready to be a parent. Mark's enjoyment and satisfaction he gains from Juno's character help bring this side out of him, making him finally feel heard and gave him a bit of a motivation to pursue his music that his wife doesn't really support him with, which is why this situation can connect to Rogers' theory. Carl Rogers believes that the environment can affect our limits to accomplishing our goals. Rogers discusses the ways one personality can change others and some of their life choices due to the pattern of satisfaction and emotional support they gain from the other person's character. The theory also speaks about how we humans are able to succeed in what we want to do, but only if another is able to fulfill the emptiness of that person, allowing that person to feel like they are able to accomplish what they're aiming for. Mark and this theory connect best because Mark feels vulnerable in his relationship with his wife. He's more into band and wanting to make something out of it, but since his wife may not give him the notice he needs or the attention that he needs and only talks down on his plans, he may feel like Juno brings out the colors out of him, since that's what's been holding him back from making his music. Mark's wife, Vanessa, has more of a world social mindset, meaning she believes that at a certain age it's time to put all your attention into starting a family rather than pursuing what you really want to do because it's too late or you're too old. The perspective can be validated because Mark's comfortability with Juno and confessing the truth only after Juno would hype him up and tell him that his music is great and show him support about his music and tell him that it's a great idea what he's trying to do. And these are words that he had never heard from his wife before. So Juno's attention and her same interest that she shares with Mark gives him that satisfaction that he needs to feel like himself again, because that's what he is into, which is why I believe it best connects with Carl Rogers' theory.